Good morning or afternoon, depending where you are. And this is actually one of my favorite topics. And we had a meeting yesterday at BCG, and I make a lot of placements. Personally, I make, I don't know, probably an average about three placements a week, which is a lot. And we tabulated the results of all the placements that I've made and all the recruiters have made. And in my case, 95% of the placements that I've made so far this year have been at firms without openings. And our best recruiters were all between 80 and 90%. And the recruiters that were doing the worst were below 50%. The point is that, and I just want to make this very early on in the presentation before I get into it, that if you're not looking at firms that don't have openings in your job search, you're killing yourself. Because I literally I make more placements in my position than anyone in this industry and probably anyone in history. And the big secret, and there's not really too much of a secret, is that most of this is at firms without openings. The other thing I'll say that's very, very interesting, and I want to bring to your attention, is because the market is so large out there, many times the candidates that I work with don't even get positions until, or start getting interviews until they've started approving firms and done it several times. And often that means on the third, and the 10th round even. So they might approve 4 firms once, 2 firms the other. And the 10th round is when a lot of times they start getting really good results. So I'm really teaching you some important stuff today. And this is, if there's anything you ever learn about job search, this is probably the most important presentation you'll ever watch. And after I do the presentation today, I will talk to you or answer questions. But this is what I'm teaching you today is something that has honestly saved countless careers of people that I've worked with, has helped countless people advance, and is really going to be a game changer if you understand it. Most people don't. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but this advice is so contrary to what people believe and so forth that they don't. So I just want you to think about that. If I've made 40 placements so far this year, if 95% of those have been with firms that have openings versus I would have only made 5% of those placements, which would have been 2 placements, which would have been a decent year for a recruiter, and that's how most of them are. I want you to I hope you understand this, and I will get started. Several years ago, there was a third-year attorney working in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Hawaii, and he contacted me looking for a position. And he'd gone to Harvard Law School. He'd done very well there, and he wanted to come back to California. And he went, and like many attorneys, he had submitted his resume to 15 of the best law firms in Los Angeles, but had not received a single interview after all those interviews. And he was very depressed. He couldn't understand why he couldn't get an interview. He applied to big firms that people from Harvard that did well there would apply to. And he was depressed and thought that maybe he'd made the wrong choice. I don't think he'd worked in a law firm ever, just going to the U.S. Attorney's Office right out of law school. And he didn't work as a U.S. attorney. I think he worked for a program in the U.S. attorney. And he said, I thought it was smarter for me to apply to firms of my own. And he just believed that he understood things and didn't need a recruiter and he could do everything on his own. And so I got involved with the search. And within 2 weeks, he had interviews at 10 of those 15 firms that he'd applied to. And it might even have been a few more. He got interviews with almost every one of them. I'm just saying 10 out of 15, but almost every single one. And he couldn't believe it. And then firms were so interested that some of them, I was playing phone tag with them. And one of them I played phone tag with, 6 or 7 times to schedule the interviews. And he also got several offers. And then he wrote me, which I should have saved, and I don't know why I didn't. I don't know. But he wrote me a long thank you letter and told me how grateful he was, and a long kind of 2-page, and said I should post it online, and I never did. And I unfortunately didn't save it. But he said how grateful his family was for all the work I'd done. And so you ask yourself, what did I do that made all this happen? If he applied to the exact same firms, why was I able to get him an interview? And what did I do that he couldn't do himself? Because honestly, there's nothing magical about what I do. I understand something, but there's nothing magical. And why was I able to get him interviews at firms he couldn't get in his own? And that's what I'm going to talk to you about in this presentation today. And I'm going to tell you what I did that got him so many offers. And really what it comes down to is understanding how the game works. And everything's a game. Getting a job's a game. Your career is a game. Everything's a game. And what I did is I made him seem desirable. And I made him seem desirable now, and like he was desirable in the past. But I'm going to talk about it more in this presentation. And the thing I would say is most attorneys never get a lot of offers. Most of them don't get a lot of offers when they're interviewing for their first job, unless they're at the very top of their class at a great law school and maybe get several offers for be a summer associate. Most attorneys don't get a lot of offers when they're interviewing laterally. Unless the economy is really good. And most people get one offer. That's really how it works. Some get two and a few more, but most don't get a lot of offers. And the reason is because many times they don't understand the importance of how to market themselves and make themselves seem desirable. And everybody's desirable, by the way, if you market yourself properly. And there are exceptions, but people that get a lot of offers, but most don't. And some of the attorneys that do get a lot of offers, and I meet them occasionally, not that often, but they can often do so without trying very hard at all. And meanwhile, a lot of attorneys are bouncing all over the map, trying to get interviews and feeling like no one wants them and getting depressed and worrying about not having gotten a job as a summer associate or being unemployed. And many of them give up and they stop trying because it's easier to give up than it is to continually face rejection. And that's a shame because anybody can get a job. I honestly can get anyone a job. It doesn't matter who the person is. If I push hard enough, I can get them a job as an attorney somewhere and probably much better than they could get on their own. And that's not to brag. It's just because it's not that I don't have any special persuasive skills. I just understand the rules of the game that I'm going to talk to you about. And honestly, my persuasive skills are not, I don't try to talk people into taking offers. I don't. There's just rules and you get people offers and jobs based on following them. So I want to take an example of, there's just rules for everything. There's rules for getting married. Some women, for example, will get multiple marriage proposals from very desirable men, and others will never get one. The women who get a lot of proposals are often the ones that even aren't interested in getting proposals. And the same thing goes for the attorneys that get a lot of offers, that they often aren't even that interested in getting all these offers. And that is an issue. And then let me just see here. And so you might ask yourself, what are these women and what are these attorneys doing differently? And what is it that they're able to do that other people are not? And that's something that you need to think about. So a year ago, I was talking to, figure out this camera here. But sorry, a year ago, I was talking to a hiring partner of a large firm, and he said to me, "What is the most in-demand practice area? What do you have that no one else is going to be able to find me?" And the answer was very easy. I told him real estate. I said that real estate is very strong and no one can get real estate attorneys. And I said, I have a very good real estate attorney a few buildings over from you. And I said, if you want, I'm sure he would be interested in speaking with you. The attorney brightened up and asked me to send the person right over. And he said, we need one right away. We're dying over here. And after speaking with the real estate attorney and telling him a little bit about the firm, I sent him over for an interview. He met with a few people. The hiring partner called me as he was leaving the building and said, everyone loved him. We want to bring him back for a half day of interviews and have lunch with him and some associates. So meanwhile, I thought this was all strange because the law firm was a branch office of a international law firm located about 750 miles away from the firm's other offices. There didn't seem to be a single real estate attorney at the branch office, and the office didn't even seem to do real estate work. So I was really unclear about how the law firm expected to keep this attorney busy. And so I asked the associate, I said, I would encourage you to ask them how they expect to keep you busy without any real estate attorneys in their office. And I said, the firm was much better than the firm the attorney was at, but at the same time, it didn't seem like it could be a good place for them to work. So I just wanted the person to be careful. And the attorney didn't ask where the real estate work in the firm was coming from, but he went back and he had a strange set of second interviews. He met some IP litigators, some patent attorneys. They were doing a lot of IP in the office, and an attorney who specialized in education law, not a single real estate attorney. And then at the end of this, he told me, when I talked to him that evening after his interviews, he said, I really liked the culture and could see myself fitting in there. And then the day after his second round of interviews, the hiring partner left me a message that the firm was extremely impressed with him and just needed a clearance from the national office to hire him. And I still didn't understand what was going on because the firm literally did not have any real estate work as far as I knew. A week went by and then another week and I didn't hear anything. And then the hiring partner, I would call and someone would say just a moment and then he would never pick up. And then it would go to his voicemail. And then I started sending emails. And then about 3 weeks after all these interviews, I received a short email from him. And it said something along the lines of, I think my enthusiasm may have gotten the best of me and my partners have been joking with me and giving me a very hard time. We don't have any real estate work in this office. He said, we understand how hot real estate is, but it doesn't make sense for us to hire this attorney when we don't have anything for him to do. And they said, if you find us a partner with sufficient business that keep both them busy, that could work. Can you find us a partner first? So you may be asking, why would a firm bring an associate in that doesn't have any real estate work, put them through a whole round of interviews, give them good reviews, and then try to hire them? This is a branch office, and admittedly, maybe the person that was doing the hiring had a budget and didn't know what they were doing, but sounds to me, and it is, crazy. But this sort of thing I've seen happen before, and this is part of this formula that I'm going to talk to you about, why this happened and how it happened. And if you understand why this happened, it can help you in your professional life and your personal life. It all has to do with how desirable something looks, how rare it looks. And I'm going to share that with you in just a moment. But when people believe something is very strong and other people are interested in it, then they're much more likely to want it. It's like that with anything. But I'm going to tell you more about that because there's a lot to it. But I want to tell you real quickly about another experience I had with a candidate. And I was unable to help this candidate, but this illustrates the larger point I'm making in this presentation. This particular candidate was a junior partner at a major law firm and was working with me and another recruiter. And the other recruiter was with the junior partner engaging in a scam related to the junior partner's book of business. And this scam has been going on forever. Since I saw this scam happening when I was practicing law with partners who were hired in firms I was in. But this is how the scam works. And most large law firms fall victim to the scam. Actually, I say once every 5 to 10 years, but it's probably even less than that, maybe once every couple of years. And there law firms all over the country are taken by the scam. And so what happens when a law firm makes a junior non-equity partner? This is how all law firms work. They will typically, many times, the majority of the time, the non-equity partner will not have very much business, if any. And so this is with large law firms especially. So they're giving the person the partner title in the hopes that they can use that and go out and start generating business and then be self-sufficient. And then the law firm will make even more money from them than they were making as an associate with the business the person brings in. So that's the hope. And they want the person to become a partner so that they call them a partner so they can give them something to look forward to and advance people, and then so they can use that title to attract clients and so forth. But most attorneys that become non-equity partners never get the business they need to become equity partners. It just doesn't happen. And so if the law firm has sufficient business to keep them busy, they may keep them indefinitely. There are firms that have lots of non-equity partners that have a lot of work, even some major firms. Kirkland's one of them, where you can work there indefinitely without business. There's other firms like that too. But most of the time, at most major firms, what happens is if you don't get enough business within a couple of years, then the law firm is going to stop sharing work with you. They're basically going to be pushing you out. And that's pretty much what happens to junior partners all over the country at firms. They make partner, but then they get a couple years to get business. They're unable to make that transition. And then the law firm starts asking them to kind of go your own way. And so they either go in-house or they go to smaller firms and they do those sorts of things. But that's how it typically works. And like many junior partners in this guy's shoes, he soon learned that he only had these options. He could go in-house because he didn't have any business. He could get business, or he could find a law firm that didn't require him to have business. And this is what happens to attorneys all over the country. It's happening probably, if you're in a large law firm, it's probably happening to several attorneys right now that you work with and know. But this junior partner, like many others, and many of them do this, went for a fourth option, which is unethical, not really an option at all, but it's done all the time. As a matter of fact, I would estimate, and it's done by males and females alike, but what they do is they basically say they have a book of business and they shop that around to new firms, and they say that they're interested in large firms, and they start throwing around the names of major firms. and they think that they're going to be able to stay employed in a major firm and as a partner. And so basically my response to them is always, you're not going to be able to get into a major firm unless you have several million dollars in business. And then they always say something like, I'm probably going to be able to bring some of the firm's clients, meaning not their clients, but someone else's clients. If I do this, it's going to be several million dollars. Then I ask how sick. And then they don't always say so directly, but usually I learn that if something along the lines, it's going to be extremely difficult. But I could tell them I'm bringing these clients and see what happens. So I don't participate in this, but I certainly get taken in by it and have been taken in by it before. Most recruiters have. Actually, every recruiter has. And it's the oldest trick in the book. It's been going on for decades. And so what happens is the law firm, the attorney will typically get hired because despite representing their book of business falsely, the firm won't check it. When they get to the new firm and they'll negotiate the highest salary and money that they possibly can. When they get to the new firm, the attorney will explain that the clients aren't moving, but they're setting up meetings and so forth, and they'll get them to move so they can build up a book of business again. And then after about 18 months or so with no business, the firm will push the attorney out and the cycle will start again. And a lot of times it's interesting, but what happens is the attorney has a very hard time living with himself when they get to the new firm. They don't bring in the business. They often start abusing substances and stuff because they're freaked out and they stop showing up. It just weird stuff happens and it's not good. But this is what happens. People are trying to save their career, and it's going on in every city. It's going on in most firms to some extent, and not most firms, but a lot of firms. And instead of my junior partner candidate, instead of him getting interviews at firms requiring $3 million books of business, I was able to get him interviews with smaller firms that didn't require business and had a need for his world-class training and skills. But he wasn't interested. And he told me that his other recruiter had been able to get him interviews at firms like Skadden, Sidley, and others. And from instinct and a long history of watching this sort of, I knew what was going on. He had another recruiter represent that he had an incredible amount of business and that firms all over Los Angeles were competing for him. And the recruiter was able to convince people of that. And ultimately, this candidate got a position in a major American law firm in LA. And to my astonishment, I started seeing front page stories in like legal period publications around LA and so forth, how he'd been hired by this major firm representing major clients. I was sitting at my desk and I got an email from the lead story. It was on law.com, I think, and it came across my desk. I couldn't believe it. And there were quotes from the head of the firm bragging about how pleased they were that he was hired. And it just, I couldn't, it was one of the strangest things. I don't know if strange is the right word, but it's the kind of thing I see all the time. And I'm pretty confident this attorney had increased his take-home pay probably to over, from what I'm assuming was $300,000 to $400,000 to probably over $850,000 now that I think about it, for all of the representations he made. And I knew it wouldn't last for long. I spoke with a recruiting coordinator at another major firm where the attorney did not get an offer. And I asked if she saw the news story and if her firm was interviewing him too, which I already knew, but didn't let her know. And because he told me, and that she said something like, man, the other recruiter had him thinking he walked on water. They flew in business class to our New York office, took him out to dinner with his wife, and it was amazing. They really wanted to believe he had all the business and all these firms were interested in him and so forth. And the firm wanted to believe it. And then she explained that they got very close to making him an offer. And she insisted that they contact some of his clients to see if he really was the originating attorney. That seems like a very simple request. And when this happened, the attorney turned hostile, told him he was looking at other options, and everything began to unravel. And while this is unusual, it did make the law firm gun shy enough that they decided the odds are he probably didn't have the business. And the legal recruiter that was involved was burning a bridge, but the formula was simple. I've got this guy between $3 and $5 million in business. Everyone wants to hire him. Are you interested? He won't last long. And the recruiter made him seem so desirable that other firms were literally falling all over themselves to hire. So that's how that works. That's how someone gets hired in a major firm without a lot of business. But so here's what I do and how you can do this ethically. Like I can find, when I work with a candidate, we always have a section of our cover letters. And if you're one of our candidates, I think our recruiters would be happy to show them to you. It's always called What We Like About This Person. And then find truthful aspects of their background that make them seem as desirable as possible and make firms want to interview and hire them as quickly as possible. So we make them seem very desirable. And the law firm, the attorneys seem so desirable that firms want to hire them even many times when they don't have the kind of work the attorney does, as illustrated by what happened with a real estate attorney. And because if you make the person seem desirable and everybody wants them, then law firms feel like they're missing out on something if they don't get them. So here's another quick example. Several years ago, I was working with an insurance coverage attorney in Los Angeles, and she was very senior. I think she had about 10 years of experience, and that's not very senior, but it's a senior for an associate. And there weren't really any jobs, but I was able to arrange a few informational interviews for her with insurance coverage partners around the country, just informational, meaning like she wanted to talk to them about their practice. And the conversations were generally limited to something where the law firm would say, we don't have anything for you right now, but if we do, we'll contact you. And one afternoon I was sitting in my office and I got a call from the recruiting director of a pretty big law firm in LA. And she was calling and just flat on the phone. And she called to say, we're passing on the person, which just means we're not going to hire them. And I don't know, I was in a certain type of mood that day. And I said, that's insane, or that's crazy. You can't pass on her. You have a great insurance coverage practice, and this attorney's speaking with law firms all over the country. They're very few good ones like her, and like anywhere near who have the experience with the same insureds. You can't afford to not interview her, and you may never see someone like this again. You really need to think about this, reconsider. I really want to help you guys because you hired someone for me recently. Let's get her in there for a screening interview with the head of your insurance coverage practice, because she's going to get interviews very quickly, and you need to move quick. And then so the person perked up and was, oh, I didn't realize she had all this interest, blah, blah, blah. And very quickly, 30 minutes later, the firm called up. They wanted to bring her in right away. They called and asked me what other firm she was considering. I said, she's speaking with everyone. But I said, if you're moving first and give her an offer first, I bet I might be able to get her to stop her job search and accept, but I'm not making any guarantees. And I'd created a buzz with this firm, and it was about her. And this firm actually did have work, so I was helping her. And suddenly she was trending. And within a day or so, she got an offer. The law firm aggressively recruited her. They called her over the weekend while she was considering to see if she had questions and told her how much she wanted to join. And she didn't have anything else. The law firm didn't think this. They thought that they were strengthening their deck of people, that they were hiring a really good person to use that they needed. And she ended up going to the firm and doing very well. And decades later, still practicing with the people from the firm. She actually ended up leaving the firm several years later, but she left with a group. And now she's a partner, and she wasn't marketable when I was working with her, but she became marketable because a firm thought she was marketable and in demand. It's something really to think about. People, law firms and groups will do the strangest thing when they think that someone is in demand and popular. And what is the secret, by the way, to things like popularity? When people become interested in people, are the Kardashians or different types of people that you may be interested or on TikTok or Instagram, are they really that interesting, or are they interesting because they've got 1 million followers or millions of followers? And that's really how people think. They think people get interested in other people because they believe that kind of person or place or thing is in demand. People will wear things they might not even like because they think they're fashionable. So think about all the ridiculous things that you might have worn in the past and that you would never wear now, but you wore at the time because they were fashionable and they were in demand and popular. So when people think something's in demand, they want it more, and they'll do almost anything to possess and be part of it. I had a funny experience happen yesterday. I was trying to buy a rug for my living room, and it was on Craigslist, and they were asking, I don't know, a couple $1,000s for it. And so I emailed the person. I said, will you take $1,200 for it? And they said, no, the person's decided to keep it. They're going to cut it up into runners or something. And I said, that's incredible. No, will they take $1,500 for it? And they said, no, they really want it. So I ended up offering exactly what the person was asking because suddenly it was in demand. And that's how people think. And I did the exact same thing that I'm telling you here with something where I thought it was in demand. If you want to buy like a Tesla, or you want to buy certain things, like they don't give you discounts. They tell you you're going to have to wait. And that demand makes you think that's fine to pay retail. And so people are tribal, and they're motivated by what other people believe and feel. And we're like this because it makes it much easier to make decisions based on what others believe than it is for us to many times make decisions based on what we believe. If other people believe something, then it's probably the right thing. And I'm sure that at some point humans evolved because this is what enabled them to preserve or have self-preservation. But it's because it's safe. It's safe to follow the crowd, and you can't do anything wrong when you're doing that. And if everybody wants to be friends with someone, then you do too. And law firms will want to hire someone if they think everybody else is interested in them because they want to be the best and they want to feel like they're doing. So this is a mistake that attorneys make. When you're searching for a legal position, the worst thing you can possibly do is give law firms any indication that you're not desirable and that other people do not want you. That this is one of the big problems that people get into when they're searching for a job, is they really reflect that. And you need to appear the exact opposite. You need to appear incredibly in demand. And the more demand you appear, the better. People need to believe that you're in demand. One of the things, when you use a good recruiter like myself, a law firm, and I'm not pitching my services here by any stretch of the imagination, but the law firms are automatically going to believe that the person's in demand because why else would I be taking my time to work with that person? And so the law firm, that the attorney who appears in demand always ends up getting a lot of offers. And the attorney that doesn't appear in demand never gets a lot of offers or even interviews. If you appear desperate and needy, law firms just don't want to hire you. Now, they will if you ingratiate yourself and tell them you're very interested in them. That's not appearing desperate and needy. But if the law firm believes they can hire lots of people like you and they can do better and you're not in demand, then they won't hire you. It's one of the things when you're looking at different markets to work in. If you want to work in a major market and you don't have great qualifications and the law firm's getting 50 applicants just like you, that's going to be very hard for you to appear like you're in demand. You're just going to appear like they're going to be annoyed. But if you're in a smaller market applying, where there's fewer people like you and where other people are going to be interested in you, you'll have more demand. It's just like that. It's no different than the kid that sits alone in the school at the cafeteria. Very few people are willing to take a chance on someone who appears in demand. And I'll tell you a funny story. I actually, when I was in 7th grade, I transferred to a private school from a public school, and a very conservative private school. And when I first got there, I was the kid that I didn't know how to dress and all these different things that the kids were doing there. It was just a different kind of environment. And I, for my first few months, I actually was a kid that sat alone at the cafeteria table. And I don't know if alone's the right word. I sat with kids that no one else wanted to sit with. And pretty soon I made friends with somehow one of the most popular kids in the class, and then a couple other kids. And pretty soon everyone wanted to be my friend. And I hadn't changed. It was just who I'd associated with had changed. And so it's like that. When you appear in demand and people want your attention, and pretty soon I would get home at night and all these kids would want to call and talk on the phone. That's what people did back then. There was no, and be my friend. So why are law firms unwilling to hire attorneys who need jobs? But I had another actually interesting experience. And then in 9th grade, after that school, I went to another new school. And I met a girl that I liked a lot. And she liked me, but she kept telling me that she didn't want to get more serious in relationship, meaning, I don't know, saying she was my girlfriend, until I made friends at the new school. And she kind of saw where I landed socially, which I thought was very funny. So she didn't want to take a risk on that either. So think about that. People, if someone appears in demand, they want to make sure that they're protecting their brand and all sorts of things. So law firms, really, if you look like you need a job, law firms are going to believe that you're weak. But if you appear desirable, then they're going to believe that you're strong and that bringing you in is going to strengthen their group and not weaken it. They don't want to weaken their group. They want to make their group strong, and they want to strengthen it to make it look better to outsiders. If you don't appear desirable, then the group is going to be weakened. And because that attorney is going to weaken the group and make it look weaker to outsiders. People, the last thing in the world, I had an experience not too long ago. I had a firm in the Midwest hire an attorney for me. And they were not in a big Midwestern market, but not that small. And I would say a smaller Midwestern market. And anyway, they were so excited to get the person. They were so happy. They interviewed the person, they liked them, and then after they hired them, someone from the previous firm said, "Oh, you don't want that person. We didn't like them. They're no good." And that firm was competitive with this other firm. To my astonishment, and actually not astonishment, because I shouldn't have been astonished, the firm, and this is not normal behavior, by the way, this is not how things work most places. But the firm didn't want to be seen as a weaker firm or a bad firm by this other firm. And so they immediately fired my candidate, and I had to refund my fee, which was fine. But they were very negative on the person because they realized that this other firm didn't want them. So they thought they were really getting a good thing. And so even though I don't know what the person had done at their other firm, but the person wasn't perceived as highly valuable anymore, so they let them go, and that's a shame. That's one of the reasons people like being in bigger cities, because many times they can make mistakes and be anonymous. But in that market, that didn't work that way. So this phenomenon is not limited to job offers. This is an older, based on a little older article, but not too long ago, I saw people start drinking green juice, and everybody was drinking green juice. And even though the green juice they were drinking is mainly apple juice, which is frankly not that good for you. It's basically having a Toblerone chocolate. But everyone started drinking green juice, and everyone thought it was a very popular thing to do. Everybody wanted to be seen with green juice. And when it started, the whole phenomenon, which was, I don't know, a decade ago, people were drinking green juice and they wanted to be seen with it, and it was only niche manufacturers were making it, local people, and they wanted to be seen drinking green juice. Even people that smoked were drinking green juice. Golf is popular. Certain places, plastic surgery is popular. I went into one of my daughter's schools, which is in Calabasas, California, and I hadn't been there in several months, and I saw these moms, and suddenly they all had very big lips and they got lip injections. I'm not seeing anything wrong with that. I'm not judging it. That was a very popular thing to do in Calabasas. I don't know why it's popular in Calabasas, California, at least in that social circle. That was one of my daughter's classes. So people want to do things that everyone else is doing many times, and that's just how it is. Last week, I remember speaking, not too long ago, I spoke with an attorney in the recruiting committee of a major law firm who was familiar with my work, wanted me to help him in this job search. And he contacted me and said, I already know where I want to go. I just want you to set up an interviewing arrangement. I know that if you're involved, you'll maybe seem in demand, and learn that we only seem to hire people that are in demand. This is what the attorney in the recruiting committee said. And he said, I want the firm to think that I'm applying to a lot of places and will choose a firm that appeals to me most. And so I thought that was interesting. So he believed that using me would make him seem in demand. So the attorney from the U.S. Attorney's Office I mentioned earlier didn't get a single interview when he applied on his own, because despite his credentials, the law firms only saw his weakness, which at the time was he didn't have any law firm experience. He was in Hawaii. He didn't have the California bar. And he'd sent letters to the firms saying things like, I would be honored to interview. It made him sound pandering. I don't know. He maybe talked a little bit about, although I wasn't a summer associate, things along those lines. But when I got involved, it was a different story. I talked about his recent promotions they do at his attorney's office, and that how well he's doing, and basically implying that they wanted him to stay and don't want him to leave. I introduced deadlines saying, you need to make a decision. Interviews, he's only got a few days. His schedule's going to fill up quickly. I'd like you to be one of them. And if you do, you better move fast. I told each law firm that wanted to interview him that I'd have to check. So I acted when they did call, like I couldn't necessarily get it done. I'd need to check. I'd stated, and I interviewed him. I tried to learn more about how competitive this job was. And the job he had applied to, there were actually over 500 applications for, and he was the only person hired. That was great. There were people from Yale and Stanford and other great schools that applied for this position, and he was one of the only ones hired. Someone obviously had seen something great in him in the past. And so I brought that out and discussed it and put a link to the application stats for the program that were online. And I let people know that firms like him didn't come along that often, or someone like him didn't. He had trial experience, which most people don't get that young. And so I put that all in there. And he really did have good experience. And I wrote an 8-page letter about all this. I really went all out because I was invested and I wanted him to do well. And I spent the time. And I made him seem highly desirable to groups in the past and highly desirable right now. And so instead of a resume that just said something very simple, I created a cover letter. I created a document for him that attested to his greatness and so forth. Now, this isn't necessarily something you can always do yourself. I'll tell you a little bit about that in the future. But I definitely changed the rules of the game for him in the equation by making him seem desirable, when in the past, Harvard's a big law school. There's 550 people that graduate from there a year. Good law firms get a lot of applicants from them all over LA and different parts of the country. It's a great school, and it's obviously got a great name, but there's also a lot of other great schools that people apply to big law firms in big markets like LA. So here's some keys to getting a job to getting offers. And I'm sure people have questions about this today, so I will, talk more about it. But one of the reasons that it's important to have gone to a good law school many times is that, and have had good jobs, it shows that other highly competitive groups to get into have wanted you in the past. So let's face it, if you go to a really good law school or a really good college and stuff, and that shows you're able to gain acceptance into the most competitive groups, and that's good. So people like that. People like people that have to meet a high bar to get acceptance by groups. That makes the group stronger. And if a law firm believes you're in a high demand right now, and that a prestigious and highly competitive groups are competing for you, then they're just by nature going to be more interested in you. People like people that other people like. It's just how it works. They want people that other people want. And this is the secret to getting anyone interested in you. They must believe that others are in demand and other people want you. That's just what you have to do. This is what the secret of popular people. Many times it's the secret of people that become successful in any profession. It's the secret of attorneys that are able to get a lot of business. If you seem like you're in demand, and the law firm won't be able to find someone else like you that easily, they're going to bite, and they're going to be eager to bring you in and hire you. That's just how it works. You have to look in demand. And if a law firm believes you're in demand, they're often going to try to hire you without even having a logical reason to do it. Just like the real estate firm, or the firm that was trying to hire my real estate attorney. They didn't even have a real estate practice, but they tried to hire him because they believe that they needed one. It's just nuts. It's like when people buy things that they don't need. People do that all the time. They want something. If a law firm believes a partner has millions of business and is being courted by every firm in the city, they're going to hire that person. And that is crazy. They were trying to they're so desperate, they don't even ask the question of whether or not the person has the right amount of business they represent. So ultimately, for you to get an offer from multiple firms and to do that, you need to come across as very in demand and someone who's looked like they're always in demand. You need to look like your level of success everywhere you've gone has been such that no one ever wants to see you go, that you provide way more value than you possibly take. And you have all these marketable characteristics and things that are so great about you that people need to move fast. And that really is the secret. And I'm sure you guys are going to have a lot of questions about examples of this, and I will answer them. But yesterday, it was funny. I was in an appliance store. This actually wasn't yesterday, but when this was written, I was in an appliance store looking for an oven. And at the time, I had a 25-year-old refrigerator that I wanted to replace sooner than later because ugly, outdated, energy inefficient. And while I was in the store, I asked about a new one I saw on the floor. And over the next 45 minutes or so, I was able to negotiate $10,000 for a $18,000 fridge. And I was told it was never discounted, and that they only sell these floor models every 4 years when new models come in, and they never discount this sort of floor model so much and so forth. And keep in mind, I'm just looking around, and if I didn't purchase it today, someone else would. So I found myself starting to sweat, and I didn't want to spend that much money, but it made no sense because honestly, I was there looking for an oven, not a refrigerator. But I wanted a good brand, I wanted a newer one, and I wanted something before someone else would. And I wanted something that was desirable. So finally, I said, fine. They started printing up a sales contract, and then I stopped. And I said, what if it doesn't fit? And they said, then we'll give you a store credit. And I said, well, then I'll lose my negotiation leverage. And I thought about this, and I had the people follow me to the house to measure my wall before I spent $10,000. And sure enough, it didn't fit. And I've been sold based on other people wanting something, and that was something that others wanted now. And who knows? But I was buying something that didn't even fit. So the idea is you need to have a brand that appears desirable and in demand. And that's really the key to getting offers. And you can do that no matter who you are. And it works every time. So I will be back in about 1 or 2 minutes, and we'll start questions. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to start with questions. Give me 1 second here. Okay, yeah, so just guys, ask as many questions as you have. I will start. Questions are really helpful for everyone that's on the call, just because most of the time people will have the same questions as you have, and they're all certainly anonymous. It can definitely, you don't have to use your name, and I won't use your name or anything. I actually can't see your name. Everyone's looks like they're signed up as anonymous attendees. Let me just fix this real quick and open the screen, sorry. But yeah, as many questions as you guys have is very helpful to ask. Okay, here's a question. I'm a top 10 law student working in a small firm this summer. I'm getting great experience, but I'm still interested in transitioning to a large firm in New York City. However, the fact that I did not work in a large law firm made me look not in demand. I understand the inference will probably then I get a big law offer, which is true. How do I overcome this? Okay, so there's lots of ways to overcome this. So you have to ask yourself, how do I look in demand? So the way to look in demand is dependent on a lot of different things. So it's often dependent on your practice area. It's dependent on your practice area school, location, and then just general timing. So the first thing is if you want to work in New York City, that's an admirable goal. I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't know why you want to work in New York City. You may have a reason. I don't know what the reason is. You may have family there and so forth. But typically, the way to get a job in most markets is to figure out what practice areas are in demand. So if you want to work in New York City, then the big practice area there is always corporate. If you are a corporate attorney and you get experience in the biggest firm you possibly can, or in the most discrete area of corporate law you possibly can, or in a small firm in any market, and you get a couple years of good experience, then you will probably be able to move to New York City, because there's always fewer corporate attorneys than they have in large firms, especially if you're a graduate of a top 10 law school, which is awesome. That should help you. That'll make you look in demand. There's nothing wrong with not having got a summer associate job. Lots of people don't get good summer associate jobs. It's a crapshoot. It depends on the school you go to. It depends on, how ready you are for on-campus interviewing. It depends on your first semester grades. It's just stuff that's beyond your control. But now what's under your control is your practice area. So if you want to work in that market, corporate is the best thing to do. But the other thing is your school is going to make you in demand in markets all over the country. So just because it's not New York City doesn't mean you're not marketable in Chicago, San Francisco, or Palo Alto, wherever, other big markets, Texas, who knows, Atlanta, I don't know. But I'm just saying there's a lot of other big markets besides New York City. So your school will make you very marketable there. I remember I had an experience when I was in law school. I was visiting my girlfriend at the time in Pennsylvania, and they were in Harrisburg. And I met an attorney there that represented her family, and they told me that I would be able to get all these positions there just based on the school I went to as an entry-level attorney. And they seemed like they were doing pretty well. I went to, I don't know, with Virginia, I think it's still probably a top 10 law school. So that helped me. So the school you went to makes a big difference and will make you seem very desirable. And you may have reasons. You can always say that you went to the smaller market because of family or girlfriend or, I don't know, boyfriend, or whatever the reason you're in the smaller market. So there's nothing to overcome, but location makes a big difference. The location, again, smaller markets are markets where you are in demand and can make a difference. If you went to a southern school like Virginia or Duke, there's not a lot of people that go to those schools that go to California, or that at least wasn't when I was younger. If you go to the other big schools, I don't know what school you're at, but if you go to, Stanford, there's not a lot of people from Stanford that go to Chicago. So, that the other location that you choose is going to make you in demand because there's not a lot of people. So an example would be Harrison applying to firms, and when I applied to firms in California, I got tons of interviews and went after a clerkship, or during a clerkship, I guess, during clerkship. And the reason was because there weren't a lot of UVA graduates. There's just UVA rare, or UVA was rare, I don't know if it still is, rare in LA. There were hardly anybody from UVA. There's that. And then the other issue to make you appear in demand is just timing. I don't know what the practice area is, but right now the market is actually, if you're in litigation, the market's improving for litigation. You may actually be able to get a position in New York now as a litigator because litigation's improving. It's also very good in Boston. It's improving in Boston. It just depends on your practice area and timing. So all these things can make you marketable. You have to be in the right place at the right time. And so you're in demand people become in demand I said at the beginning of this that I place a lot of people, and one of the only thing that I would do differently with you is I would figure out what kind of practice area you're in. Once I did that, if you were in corporate, I would market you to tons of corporate firms, especially mid-size, lower tier, larger ones that are having a hard time. I don't market law students, but are having a hard time finding corporate attorneys in this market. I would, depending on your school, I would market you to areas of the country where they don't get a lot of people from your school. So they want to have those sorts of people. I would figure out where your school, and then your practice area. If you were litigation, I probably would send you to firms in Boston because that's a good market right now in other parts. And then also that. So you'll be in demand. You're very in demand. Maybe just not in New York City, but I guess my question is, it's very difficult to stand out in a market like New York City because there's so many of you and whatever it is you are. And you can be a small fish in a big pond or a big fish in a small pond. If you're coming up against resistance in New York City now, imagine what the resistance is going to be like in a few years when all those people are still competing. It's hard, but I don't think not getting a job in New York City is not something to worry about, especially for your first summer. I think anybody worried about that kind of stuff is making a mistake. It's just very short term. And again, I don't know how old you are, but let's say you're 23 or 24. People practice 24 years old. It's very common for people to practice till their 80s. That's what is, and maybe even longer by the time you grow up. So that's 55 years of practice left. So you can't even possibly imagine what's going to happen between now and then. And you could certainly be in a huge New York firm and maybe you'll start the next giant New York firm. Who knows? But lots of stuff can happen. But this looks like a good question. Yeah, and just keep answering questions, asking questions. These are really helpful questions. Let's see here. So maybe this appears as sour grapes. So looking who large law firm, I cannot believe how ridiculous their hiring is. Maybe this affected who looks the most in demand. I see people who get offers of better firms, but I know I have no intention of staying in a law firm who hold extremely radical political beliefs about why corporations are evil and other types of nonsense. But these people seem to have played the game better than I did, regardless. What am I missing here? Wow. Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of times you're right. People will get hired that have no intention of staying in a firm and they're just playing a game. But you have to remember that a lot of times people say they have no intention of staying in a firm, even if they do. They say that because they're worried about rejection and getting pushed out, so they want to have something to fall back on. So they're trying to act like when they fail, they're not committed because everyone knows how difficult it is. And so that's not necessarily, I know that's not what you may want to hear, but that is one of the way it works, is that people can have beliefs about why corporations are evil, and everyone's entitled to their own beliefs. And certainly there are some evil corporations, but not all corporations are evil. And it depends on how you define evil. And they're just trying to make money, but they don't always do so in the right way. So it is a game. Many times when law firms are hiring people from law school, typically they're looking at grades, they're looking at undergraduate, and those are the big things. But grades are the number one thing. They're also looking very heavily these days at diversity because law firms traditionally haven't had a lot of diversity, and they're getting a lot of pressure to have diversity. So they want diversity, and diversity can mean lots of different things, but they want that. And then they also are going to look at your undergraduate history of achievement, many times your work history. So, I don't know what law school you go to, but grades are typically the number one thing. If a student is very top of your class at wherever they go, and then also on geography. So an example would be like in LA, if you go to some of these local law schools, like Loyola is a local law school, a very good school. But if you're like in the top 5% of the odds are very good you'll get hired by a top firm in LA. Maybe not in Chicago or New York, but you'll definitely get hired by a top firm in LA. Some law firms automatically hire a certain number of people out of local law schools. So that's how it works. So that's just something to remember. So it's nothing really to worry about, and typically people want people that are rare. So grades, there's obviously the better, the rarer. For this, that's not necessarily rare, I guess, but there's only a certain number of local law students. Diversity is by its nature, it's not dominant. I don't know what the right word, but there's not, diversity is rare in most firms. In many firms, if you went to a really top 5 or top 10 school, there's not a lot of those people for undergraduates. Work history, if you were like, say, you worked in the president's office, rare work history makes you good. You're very, impressive former career. And then you also have things like, what else would make you rare? I'm trying to think here. Work history, and then athletics. So sometimes people might have been in college athlete, Olympics, things like that. And then you have some other things like tall, very tall. I don't know if that can help. Very tall, very attractive, whatever. I'm just attractive, very well spoken, exceptional. So anything that's rare and makes you stick out is going to help. So that's how people are evaluating people. They're evaluating them on rare type qualities. And so the more rare your qualities are, the more unique you are, the more in demand you can seem. So I'm always amazed when I represent people that have been former athletes, what good jobs they get. People that have the best grades, that are at the top of their class, at law schools almost always get good grades. People that are diverse, that can help, and definitely with some firms, and it can help. Having gone to your Yales and places like that as an undergraduate can definitely help. Having had a distinguished career before you go to law school can help. I've seen people that were, sometimes military is a little, but yeah, military can help. So there's certain firms that really like military people. There's being an engineer, I don't know, other massive leadership, other important jobs can help. That can help. And then people love athletes. I'm always amazed at how many athletes get hired. I've had like bidding wars practically for athletes. And then many times just being attractive or very well spoken and just very enthusiastic, I would say, and well informed can also help. So anything that makes you stick out, good. So people are just hiring for rareness. And so most people, if you look at how things work and why big firms hire, most people don't have the best grades. Most people are not diverse. Most people did not go to top colleges. Most people did not have a great work history before law school. Most people were not college athletes. Most people are not very tall, very attractive, well-spoken, or exceptional. And most people are not very enthusiastic and well-formed. So if you do any of those things, many times you can get a much better job than you otherwise would get. So I'm just trying to give you some of the explanations of why people get good jobs that I've seen in my history. And that may be some of the stuff you're missing there, but that can all help. And then sometimes people just turn it on. That's the enthusiasm. Sometimes there's certain people that just go in and they turn it on, and they connect, and they get it done, and they show up, and they're on, and they want it. And I think a lot of it just comes down to desire. And what I was saying earlier is that the people that may be getting these jobs you don't think should be getting the jobs may actually really want it, but may be acting like they don't, but in private to other attorneys, but are other people in your school. I don't know. Okay, let's see here. But these are great questions. I really do like them, and I hope you guys keep asking more. These are really helpful. Okay, so here, much of what you talked about, say, is engaged in sales puffery about a candidate. Is that a fair assessment? Any recommendations about how to do this in cover letters about yourself as opposed to the candidate in our initial interviews while also being truthful? One of the recurring points in your articles. How much are firms likely to follow up with references from employers to fact check? Okay, so this is an interesting question, and I can see why you may have taken part of my presentation that way. So I completely understand why you would. I'm actually not recommending sales puffery. What I'm recommending is how you position yourself to law firms to look desirable to them. And that's really the most, the question is, how do you position your strengths and background in the best way possible to make law firms, and that's really the best way to think about it. Now, I will agree that one of the reasons that recruiters are, and not everyone should be using a recruiter, but one of the reasons they're very good is that they will bring out your strengths and can say things about you that you couldn't say on your own. And so if I go to you and I say, I did this and I did that, and I'm this, your reaction is, okay, fine, whatever. But if someone else says it, especially if that person has credibility for you, then you're much more likely to listen to them. So that's how one of the things that I recommend is, if you can, having other people speak for you, but most people don't. So one of the ways to do that, and I think it might be useful for all of us to have a resume workshop next week. I haven't done one of those in a while, and that would be helpful. And those typically go several hours, but that would be good, is to go over resumes. And because you typically will highlight your strengths and what you've done well in your resume, and you can do that and then downplay your weaknesses. So one of the things that people do in their resumes is a lot of times they're very proud of graduating with a 3.1 from law school, or graduating in the top 50%, and they put that on their resume, or they put things on that have nothing to do with what they're trying to do, or they don't emphasize their strengths enough, or they letting everything ride on the fact, or they'll have their law school and they'll put down that they were the member of some religious organization during law school. I mean, like that, if that's your only achievement of being in law school, that's probably not a good thing. So you need to make sure that your resume itself emphasizes your strengths and doesn't emphasize your weakness. So you need to lead with your strengths. And then the other thing is that you need to think about and this is a very important thing. And one of the reasons this is so important is because you're a lawyer, and everybody here is expected to be a lawyer. And when I used to clerk for a judge, I would actually go to these trials and watch these trials because they were more fun, especially the criminal ones. And I would rather work late and that sort of thing and watch one of these trials than not sit in court. If you watch a criminal attorney, the client may have done some of the worst things imaginable, but a good attorney is always going to have a very straight face and emphasize the strengths and get you to consider and ignore evidence of negative things and try to look at positive things. And that's what you need to do with yourself. And people don't understand that. You don't bring attention to negative things. So if I was representing a murderer, I wouldn't put on his resume, and he had to submit his resume to the court. I wouldn't put on there that he liked to watch murder shows. He was an avid hunter. He'd received a stalking citation. I don't know. But you don't put things on there. But that's what people do when they represent themselves with their resumes. They draw attention to things that aren't achievements, and they draw things to make themselves look average, and they don't emphasize their strengths. Instead of putting that stuff on there, the guy should be putting things about how he goes to church every week, about how he was a Boy Scout, like whatever. But people always, lead with their negatives, and it doesn't help. So you are allowed to be, puffery is not being truthful, it's being an attorney, and it's emphasizing your strengths and having a story that talks about your strengths. When a lot of people go into a new relationship and they meet someone new, whether it's romantic or a friendship, they don't start off by telling that person things that are wrong with them or emphasizing their negative traits. They start off by really thinking about what makes them so positive, and they come up with a story. And they do it instinctually, by the way. Most people do this instinctively. When you meet a new friend, you say, hey, we have this in common. We have this, we do this, and I like this, and you like this, and isn't this great? And that's what people need to do when they're trying to get jobs, is you need to do the same thing you do with trying to same thing you do when you make friends or significant others. Find commonalities and downplay weaknesses. We don't talk about your negatives. You don't emphasize things that are bad about yourself. You make yourself seem strong, and you go with your strengths because you want people to like you. And that's what you need to do. So you need to think that way. And that's what the best attorneys do. The best attorneys, if you tell them 15 bad things about their client, they're probably not even going to react. They might not even argue back, especially if they're true. But then, have you ever seen, like in a crime show, where they say there's no questions? If a witness is called and there's just this horrible things, they say no questions. They realize that they're going to have to influence you some other way. So you need to be able to put together a really good argument for yourself that makes you look strong, and think about how do you emphasize your strengths. And that's what a good recruiter does. They just bring out, you can do yourself. They bring out what's positive about you. All these things. What's positive? Are you from an area and want to relocate there? Or you don't have to talk about being diverse, but maybe you are, and you can certainly send out signals about that. Or if you went to all these, if your work history, if you did something really special, there's just all sorts of things you can do to emphasize your strengths. And so I recommend that everyone do that and figure out what makes you special. And everybody has lots and lots of strengths. So you just need to make sure that people are picking up on them and you're showing people what those strengths are. And I hope that helps. It's a lot of information, but I wanted to make sure you understood that, because just think in terms of what do you do in a relationship, and what do you do in relationships compared to what you do when you meet new people, compared to what you do in interviews. Are you showing your best self? And the other thing is think about someone that, are you not interested in a friendship or date? If you've ever had a successful, I'm sure you have, but if anybody here has ever had a successful relationship with someone of the opposite sex or the same sex or whatever romantic relationship, generally you're very excited about that person when you meet them. When you see them, there's something about them that clicks. So you need to be able to convey the same level of enthusiasm for whoever you're trying to work for. And that's very interesting. So I had an experience not too long ago, and it's probably inappropriate to talk about here, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. I met this woman just by chance. She came to my house to look at a piece of exercise, well, it's exercise equipment I was selling. And I started talking to her, and she's an attorney, and she brought out all these really great qualifications, great commonalities that we had, and really presented this amazing personality to me. And then I met her, and she told me she used to be this famous model, and that what else did she do that was interesting? Told me all the best aspects of her business. Told me, because she owned a law firm, told me what else, that she was French, all these different, all this stuff looked really good. And meanwhile, so then I spent some time getting to know this person. And then later, I found out she was married, and she didn't tell me that. She didn't tell me that for the longest time. And she's not really married. She's basically estranged, which is fine. But the point I'm saying is that people will talk about their best qualities first, and they'll bring your attention to the best qualities, and they'll avoid negative qualities. And she also didn't talk about her kids and other things. Now, that was her choice, and she probably, who knows what was going on there. But the point is that this is how you sell people on things, is you emphasize your best characteristics. And this person did an exceptional job of that, making herself seem in demand and successful and everything. And that's what everyone does. That's what you do when you meet people. So this is the kind of the big point I'm trying to make today, is that person was very good at making themselves seem in demand. And if you do that, anybody can do that. I hope that helps. I know that's a long-winded answer. But this is just so important. This is sort of a day-to-day question about how quickly is this too specific, or should I ask what the expectations are? If someone doesn't ask for how quickly you should turn around an assignment, then typically then you want to ask. But the other thing is you should always you should ask what the expectations are. The worst thing you can do, though, and this sounds like a question of a summer associate or something. So the worst thing you can do is make errors, be sloppy, not think through things, and not be careful, and give wrong answers. So that's how people make mistakes. So a lot of times, especially when you don't have legal training, you get an assignment and you're in a real hurry to give an answer. And so people will do everything they possibly can to very quickly give an answer because they're really eager to show it to the teacher. But at the same time, that's not what law firms want. They want you to think through it. They want you to proof it, even if it's a memo. They want you to make sure you have the right answer. They want you to double check things. They want you to produce a perfect product. And this is just the way it works. And you don't want to spend too much time on something. But typically the best way to do things is to, especially as a summer associate, the best way to do things is to ask junior associates that you're working with, junior, mid-level, and senior people. And so they are your friends. And typically the junior are going to be the most helpful. So ask them what to do. And if you ask them, then they will talk to you all day and give you the rules. They've been through all this before. The worst thing you can do in any law firm, really, worst thing you can do is try to do everything on your own. Answer the kind of questions you're asking on your own. Now, there's a thing called vulnerability, and junior associates, mid-levels love to feel important. You would too. Love to give advice, feel important, and help. And so you need people on your side, ask questions, and you can ask them for input. They will help you. So that's one of the most important piece of advice I can give for you if you're a summer associate or a new attorney. Just ask questions of other attorneys and find people that seem to be liked by partners and so forth in the firm and are happy. If people start dishing that you're talking to, if they start talking negatively about the firm and what's not good about it and who left and everything's negative, and when you start relating to them at lunches and stuff, just avoid negative people. There's different ways of looking at the world, and there's people that will look at things positively and negatively. You need to surround yourself as a young attorney with people that see the bright side of things, because those are the people that good things are going to happen to. Negative people always leave and they'll always have problems. Not always, but most of the time. That's some advice. And then positive people help you. Many times there may not be a connection. They may not connect with you. They may be overly formal, and you may not feel like you're getting the right sense of input. So just find people you identify with, and that take an interest in you, trust, and you don't know who to trust, by the way. Interesting. Find people that you trust, and I don't get too personal with them. Do not talk about your personal life in too much detail. Or actually, you can talk about your personal life, but if you're having too much fun, which a lot of people do in the summer, I mean, you're going out and drinking and doing other things and having crazy experiences, I wouldn't talk too much about that. But if you're engaged in crazy behavior, but most people aren't. But that's how I'd recommend that. Okay, that's a great question. I'm going to be back in 1 second. I just need to grab something. All right, sorry about that. We've got a lot of questions too, which is great. These have been great questions so far. That one. Okay, here's the next question. This is a person wanting to do commercial litigation. So, following up question on the issue of the practice area when I move in New York City. Am I being totally unrealistic wanting to do commercial litigation and working from a top 10 law school and let's see, even and get a job in New York City without a summer job? No, you can definitely do commercial litigation in New York City. But the thing you need to keep in mind is litigation is the most popular practice area. Most attorneys are litigators. Most attorneys are litigators. So and New York City, people typically do not litigate. Most companies, a lot of them do. New York City is if you look at the law firms in New York City, it's mainly corporate and transactional. And litigation is a smaller practice area. Small, not in all firms, of course, but as a general kind of rule. And then because litigation is so popular and there's so many so many attorneys are litigators, the problem is that it's schools and then it's things like clerkships, and not just clerkships, but good clerkships like appellate clerkships, federal clerkships, law review, all that sort of stuff. So the qualifications in terms of what they're asking for litigators in the biggest markets are much higher many times than what they would be in the average market. So it's not just school and then it's schools. And market like New York City, you're going to find a lot more demand for a lot higher bar to get into the best firms. Not always, but most of the time as a litigator. The other problem with litigation is just that it's just a more difficult practice area to do well in New York. I mean, there's just fewer openings. The market there has not been doing well for a long time, which generally means it's going to be better. So your timing may be perfect this fall. I don't know. So I would definitely try to get positions there. But the problem is New York is just difficult because if you're, a litigator there, New York's kind of a center of a lot of corporate work and there's a lot of companies there, but most litigation, it's much harder to stay a litigator there than it is in other markets, but it's a huge market. You can definitely become a litigator there. I'm not saying it's something you should definitely pursue. The only problem with being a litigator there is that you're going to have a much more difficult time staying in one of the top firms. You can definitely get a job at a smaller firm. There's no question about it. And there's tons of mid-sized firms and smaller firms. But if you want to get into one of the top firms, it's going to be difficult for you to stay. And then it's also difficult to stay employed, and it's more difficult for senior litigators as you get more senior in New York than it is in other practice areas. The reason, and this is something I just want to bring up to everyone so you understand, and this is just for all the litigators out there, why litigation is a hard practice area. So the first thing is, for me personally, whatever litigation is, for me, clicks. So I understand it instinctually. I like it, and that's the only practice area I would not be happy doing corporate. Corporate is a different type of Corporate is a different type of practice area. So that means it's almost clerical in nature. It's hard to explain, but it's different. It's not like writing and reading and things you may be used to. It's more people that do corporate often do very well. They like business school, or they like math and science, and those were the things they gravitate towards. And people that like litigation typically psychology and writing and English and things. And it's just a different type of brain. It doesn't mean you can't develop it. But so some people, if you understand that you like litigation instinctively, and it's also litigation is also conflict. So it's constant conflict. It's fighting with people every day. It's fighting with judges. It's fighting with clients, judges, opposing counsel, everybody. And no one likes being in litigation. No one is happy when they're sued and they have to pay all these legal fees. It's very stressful. But some people like that. Some people like stress and they've grown up in it. I grew up in an environment where I was fighting a lot with people. And so for me, it's just natural. It was swimming or something. It's for a fish. I just understood it instinctively. And I like writing. So it's great. But for most people, it's not the right, without my makeup, it wouldn't be the right practice area. Corporate, on the other hand, what makes corporate such a great practice, and the other thing about litigation is it's more difficult to impossible to go in-house. So if you don't like all this and you want to go in-house later, there are in-house jobs for litigators, but for the most part, if this stuff doesn't really make you happy, then it's very difficult to go in-house. And there's tons and tons of litigators. So as you get senior as a litigator, no one's interested in you. But corporate, there's relatively few. of them. Companies always want corporate attorneys. So if you're corporate, you can almost always get a job in-house. Whether it's a small company or large companies, that they're always in demand in-house. If you have the personality for it, then it's the only thing you're comfortable doing. So if you don't have the personality for it, then it's not the right thing to do. But if you do have the personality for it, it is the right thing. And if you're comfortable or not. There's a certain type of personality in person that does corporate, and I'm not saying that in a negative way, but they're just different. They're typically not as verbal and talkative and all sorts of things, and they're a lot more dry, and they're interested in it's just a different personality. And so corporate may be what you want, but you need to decide. These are big decisions, by the way, that every attorney needs to make, especially law school, and people that may want to transition practice areas. Some people are more fit for corporate than they are litigation, and corporate typically is a little bit more, it's less confrontational. There's a lot of wordsmithing and things involved, but less creative writing, but there's creativity. I'm not going to get too far into this, but you have to decide what's best for you. And so you can't just say, I want to work in New York City as a litigator without understanding whether litigation is the right practice area for you. You can't say, and you have to understand what you want in your future. The other reason litigation is a difficult practice area is it's almost impossible to attract clients as a litigator. For new attorneys, it's very difficult unless you to attract clients. And then once you learn how to do it, it's difficult to keep doing it because your clients have a case and then it goes away. And so you have to find people with ongoing litigation. And then corporate, people like corporate because you attract clients and then you keep them. So they have you as their advisor, you're their advisor, you're their confidant, all that sort of stuff. And then they also refer other business to you. So most law firms, very much like corporate attorneys, will bring in a lot of business, whereas litigators almost always turn into a cost center. What else happens with litigators is cases settle and then they have a bunch of them they need to lay off. It's a different practice area. Okay, sorry to be so long-winded with that, but I thought that was important. Okay, thanks for the presentation, and my experience marketing yourself as a man really makes a difference. I'm an attorney with no law firm. More than 5 years experience in white collar enforcement as a contractor with the DOJ and investigator for FINRA, with a lot of experience working in front news cases. I want to transition to a law firm white collar defense, but I'm troubled trying to market myself, and the cases I've worked on are confidential. How can I make my experience is in demand? Typically, you'll talk in generalities. You'll say, represented a major company against blah, 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 received a record for judgment. Many times, especially if you're working as a contractor, you will have reviews. And so you can talk about statements from your review. You can talk about promotions you may have received that others. So you can do that, promotions. You can talk about promotions received. You can talk about trial experience you got, all those sorts of things that make you stick out and much better. And then my idea would be to find a firm. Anything to do with FINRA would be useful in either defense or as a plaintiff. And so just making sure you investigate firms that do that. And if you do that and put in some general, those are going to be the people who are going to be most interested in you. Just general white collar defense will involve things like fraud or other types of economic frauds. And you want to find firms that do the sort of work you do. So I would do a search for whatever type of cases you've worked on. I would do a search for firms that advertise themselves, or firms that advertise themselves on their websites, doing the kind of work you do. And that should help you quite a bit. So that's how I would do that. And then I would contact people inside the law firms doing the work, assuming there's no conflict, about possibility of information interviews and stuff. That's how I would do that. I hope that helps. If you have a follow-up question, I'm happy to answer it too. Okay, let's see here. I took scholarship money over going to a top 14 and went to a school in the top 30 instead. And the way you talk about it, I'm not very marketable at a super elite school. What other ways can I make myself marketable? That's just not true. So you are certainly marketable if you go to a top 30 school. If you got scholarship money, that means that you probably did very well in your LSATs and are also a very good, could do very well at the top 30 school. So the way to market yourself, it doesn't matter really where you go to law school if you do very well there, especially top 30. So just do the absolute best you can. No one needs to go to a super elite school to be marketable. It's just not true. That's not true at all. But the best way to market yourself is really just to look at multiple markets. So look at as many markets as possible, and then look for branch offices of national firms. national firms, smaller office in, firms in smaller markets. If you want to be, but you're definitely marketable. There's nothing wrong with the top 30. If your grades are good, you can do anything. I placed people, by the way, that went to the zero, like the worst law school in the country at good firms. So it's certainly nothing is going to stop you from doing well if you went to a good firm. But you will do fine. You can really do anything if you go to a good firm. So there's nothing really to worry about with that, I don't think, if you do well. But the other thing too is typically you're thinking your vision right now is short term. You have the short term term vision, and then you have your medium term vision, and then you have your long term vision. What is it that you're trying to do? So you have to ask yourself, what is it you are trying to do? What do you want to do specifically? So if your short-term vision right now should be to get the best job you can in the practice area you want. Your medium-term vision should be to get a position in the best firm you can. And then I guess long-term vision, be settled, happy, and have a career after showing your best. So people get into, just because you start out in a smaller firm or you don't get a position in the best firm doesn't mean that's what's going to happen to you the rest of your career. What you need to do is you need to work on getting to get the best possible job you can. That to me would be applying to multiple markets, strength and more. And all those sorts of things. And then your medium-term vision would be get the best firm you can after showing your strength. That makes sense. Those are the things that I would recommend to get the best firm you can after showing your strength. And then the way you would do that would be you need to work on getting more people. Let me see here, getting more stuff on your resume to make it look like you're a good attorney. So that's basically possible. So that's getting to where you are going, making the best impact you can. Learning, billing hours, getting focused experience, all that sort of stuff. Those are some of the things that I would recommend, and that's going to make experience. And then starting clients, papers, outside activities, presentations, all that sort of stuff. And this is typically how people do it. So they don't necessarily, most people don't go to a top 14 law school or top 10 law school. Most people go to schools that are ranked 100 to 250 or 150 to 250. And so and a lot of those people end up in major firms. So the way they do it is if they don't get a job in the short term in one of them, then if they get to the best firm they can, and they do everything they can to get the best experience possible, and they throw themselves into it. That means they bill a lot of hours, they try hard, they do everything they possibly can to do a good job. And that's really all you need to do. You need to do the best job you can. And once you do that, then you're in good shape. So you need to throw yourself in and look like the best possible attorney you can in your practice area. And you just need to really do everything you can. If you do that for a couple of years after not getting into the firm you want, and you do all these things at the first firm you go to, then you're going to have a lot of value, because most people don't do those things when they get to their firms, even in the large firms. And so large firms are going to see you, and they're going to be very enthusiastic about you. So I see attorneys move with below average grades from top 200 law schools all the time to top US law firms, but they do this stuff. So that's the way to think about it. It's not to worry about all the stuff in the short run. It's really to do things, and then that's sort of, okay, I'm a graduate of an unranked law school. So always think long-term. Don't think short-term. Just what can I do now? What value can I add now to the legal market? I'm a graduate of an unranked law school, but have intern and clerk for 4 judges at both state and federal levels. How can we make ourselves look like we are in demand without coming off as cocky, boastful? And how can I get larger firms to look at my applications? Okay, intern and clerk. How can we make ourselves? Okay, so basically the best way to look like you're in demand is, the first thing is, if you've clerked for 4 judges, then you want to get very good recommendations from those judges. So you probably want to get recommendation letters from them if you can, and those would be useful to even include with your applications, because those judges can write about what a good job you've done, how hard you work, how dedicated you are. So you always want to start, a lot of times you need to start with a problem before you. So this person, and a lot of times people are putting the cart before the horse. So do not put the cart before you. A lot of people are putting the cart before the horse. And what that means is here, what people are doing is a lot of times this person here with a short-term vision of not getting the law firm job you want, what this person is doing is this person is going and worrying about what can they do? Is it hopeless because I didn't go to because I only went to a top 30 law school? And that's not true. So what you should be doing is wherever you go, the problem before you right now is getting the best job you can. Once you've done that, you need to put yourself into it. You need to commit. You need to go 100%. Here's what most people do, by the way. When they don't get the job that they want initially, they're sour grapes. They don't try hard. They don't put themselves into it. They say, oh, I'm not getting paid as much money as I should. They have a bad experience. They look at their firm negatively. Their firm looks at them negatively, and everybody's unhappy and they have a crappy career. That's what most people do. Instead, wherever the hell you go, you need to throw yourself into it and give it everything you got and be the best freaking attorney they've ever seen. And then that'll make you much more confident. And then when you start later on, when you've done all these things and people see your confidence and what a freaking outstanding person you are and how well you're doing and how much you're underpaid and under challenged because you've just given it everything you've got and you're an overachiever, then when you go to you'll get a job in a big firm, you'll get a job in a better firm. And from there, you'll build yourself to a bigger firm. This is what people should do. But instead, people approach us like, frankly, I don't know the way to think about it. I'm not saying you're doing this, but as if they've already lost. But that's not what you do. Winners always emerge from stuff. People, when they call them a loser, they always win. This is what winners do. So you need to do the same thing. You need to say, oh, I went to did these clerkships. How can I not come off as cocky and boastful? You need to, whatever you did for these judges needs to be amazing. And you want them to talk about you and to say good things about you and to always be very positive about you. And then when you go into interviews and the interviews you do get, those people need to see how freaking awesome you are and how excited and how hard you'll work. And this is what the best people do. The best people go into interviews and they give the impression that I will work harder than anyone. I'll do whatever I possibly can to be the best employee you've ever seen and so forth. And if you do that, you're going to do well. And that's what you need to do. And, I'm not trying to be so direct here. The better you are at whatever you're doing now, then the more confidence you're going to get, the more you're going to be proficient, and the more that's going to come across when people interview you. And they're going to realize that they're getting energy and all sorts of things. You're selling two things, by the way, when you're selling yourself. You're selling your experience and so forth and what you can do, but you're also selling energy to learn, to get things done. Let's see here. Or undergraduate grades continue to hurt me pursuing top jobs, clerkships, big law, despite being in a top law school and having done well there. No, I don't. I'm assuming you meant top law school grades. Oh, and having done, no, poor undergraduate grades will not haunt, they won't. Sometimes people, if you're a patent attorney, will look at your undergraduate grades. But if you are at a top law school, I don't know why they would patent attorney and undergraduate grades. Sometimes they look at your undergraduate grades, but no, I don't think your undergraduate grades will affect you. If you got into a top law school, you must have done really well, your LSATs, that's great. So I don't think, and if you got great law firm, your ability to do well in law school is more a function, I think, of your legal ability than how well you do in undergrad. Anybody can do well in undergrad if they do that sort of thing. Is it completely ridiculous to pretend to be a recruiter in order to approach law firms on one's own behalf? Yes, it is ridiculous. Most law firms know that if a recruiter approaches a law firms almost all the time have agreements with the law. They know who the recruiters are. That's the thing. And then no, you can't pretend to be a recruiter in order to approach the firm. But you need to think about if I was an outside person. So it's often useful to ask other people about yourself, other people about your background. So you want to ask other people about yourself and what do they think is good? And it's because all the recruiter's doing is recruiter's taking a look at you and it's saying what's wrong and what's good. So you need to be able to do that. That's really all there is to it. Let's see. Okay. You mentioned corporate is demand. How would you describe the demand for corporate associates there's much more demand now. There's as much demand now for corporate associates as there's ever been. They're very in demand. And because there's so much demand, law firms are hiring people that they normally wouldn't hire. And so that's something to keep in mind. So that is just something to think about. But yeah, it's definitely corporate is very much in demand right now. The thing I would say about corporate, I know I've said this in other meetings, but I don't think I've said it today, is what happens with corporate is corporate gets very busy and then it typically gets extremely busy, and then all new attorneys start going into corporate because there's so much work, and law firms that hire them want them to be corporate attorneys, and then the market generally at some point will crash. And then when the market crashes, it's not good. There's just overcapacity or something. It doesn't look like it's going to crash right now. It looks like it's going to keep going forever. But that's how it always is when it's good, is it looks like it's going to always keep going forever. They thought that about the housing market. They thought about everything. But there's a lot of demand for it right now. But at some point, it's definitely going to slow down. And so when it does slow down, it becomes very difficult. But I'm seeing a lot of demand for corporate right now. And law firms are aggressively hiring corporate attorneys. The best law firms are hiring people from top 150 schools, even that weren't at the top of the class and so forth, that they have experience. So there's a lot of experience, there's a lot of demand right now. And if you're looking at multiple markets, then that's probably a good idea. Okay. Let's see here. Litigator with 12 years of experience. However, the first 8 years were in government, criminal prosecution. I have 3 years of civil litigation experience, 2 insurance defense, and 2 in construction. Last week, you said someone with more than 10 years of experience should have a book. Advance to partner in a mid-sized to large law firm. I am currently in a small law firm. I try to market a network to build a book, but it's very slow. I'm interested to hear advice now. Someone like me would be more desirable to firms in advance to partner. Okay, so there's 2. I don't know what you're doing right now. If you're in construction, by the way, that's very much in demand. So there's all sorts of firms that do construction. Insurance defense is also very marketable. In order for you to build a book of business, you need to start going out and meeting with potential clients. You need to meet with the clients and the people you are working with and develop relationships. And you need to network in the community, in the insurance or the construction community. If you're in construction, you should have not a huge problem getting business. I don't think it's that difficult to get business in construction, but the same thing in insurance defense. A lot of it is rate driven. But I do think in order to become more desirable to firms and advance to partner, my advice would be to just start going and pitching people and watching the partners in your existing firm. What are they doing to get business? And so my biggest thing would be just modeling, watching what others are doing. And then also reading. You should read. I have all sorts of articles about getting business on this website, on BCG. Read articles about getting business, read books about it, buy books, go to seminars and all that sort of stuff. You need to become a student in it, and no one can tell you, students who go to seminars, etc. So no one can tell you how to get work. They can tell you what to do, but they can't tell you. They can tell you all these things, but they certainly can't. You have to be very careful. So that's what I would recommend: is do whatever you can to become a student in things and learn about the stuff you're interested in. You need to become a student in marketing. Most young attorneys that get a lot of business tend to make business their priority. It's funny, I was talking to a very successful attorney the other day, or not too long ago, and he said something about it, that you can make the practice of law your priority, which means just where you can make getting business. And some people are more concerned about the quality of the business they get than practicing law, which is funny. But honestly, when you're younger and trying to build a brand and so forth, you often do need to work on business. Just one. Okay, so go to the next question. This is actually a good question. How can you seem desirable if you took a career break for 12 years after working at 3 top-tier law firms around the world, and now you want to launch your career since your kids have left the house? By the way, after the 12-year break, I've been teaching law. I'm hoping to get back to the firm again, but the response I've gotten to firms is I've been out for too long. That's a good question. Everybody has to choose their priorities at some point, and certainly a family is a good priority. And I don't think 12 years is that long. Even if you'd continued practicing for the past 12 years and were at a firm, it would be difficult to get another job because you don't have any business. So there is a preference in law firms for younger attorneys that are manageable, that will follow directions and work very long hours, over older attorneys that are perceived as set in their ways and not as manageable. That's just how it works. But if you do want to relaunch your career since the kids have left the house, typically the way you'd want to do things is teaching law, by the way, is often something that law firms don't like, because it looks more like you're doing something unrelated to the practice of law and something that's not as demanding and requires a different set of skills. It's very difficult to get a job if you have a lot of experience and no business regardless. But the thing is, you have skills and you worked at three really good firms. It sounds like if you did corporate, you should be able to get a job in house. But the other thing is you can always look at smaller law firms. So the one thing to remember is just that law firms are businesses. And because law firms are businesses, you want to make sure that they are, let's see here, you need to reach ones that have a need for your skills. Here's an example. So if you're willing and need for your skills. So everything is about in the real estate market is typically they always say that you don't really need a real estate agent. And a real estate agent will come in and say, oh, I'm going to do all the social media marketing, I'm going to do everything. But really what ends up selling something, what sells is the market and the price. And so what's going to sell your skills is the market and the price. So if you're willing to work for a smaller law firm that does not have people with your qualifications, need you, and cannot pay a lot, you will get hired. It's as simple as that. You just need to keep looking at a law firm that will hire you. And as you look at smaller and smaller firms, hopefully applying to places that don't have openings, you will be able to find a position. And because there's always going to be someone like you. So for example, if I was an attorney and I broke off from a large law firm and I broke off from a mid-sized law firm and I had a 3 or 4 person law firm, I would love to hire someone that had worked at a major law firm. That would look good and help me attract clients. And I would love to have them, but I wouldn't be able to pay them a lot of money. So there's lots of people like that. There's lots of upstart law firms in every market. There's lots of individuals in every market that would love to work in a smaller firm, would love to hire someone like you. So you just have to find the right firm. You can't aim for the top. Even if you were still working in a large law firm, no large law firm is going to hire someone with that much experience, and especially after a break. So you need to find a small. Okay. Let me just see here. This is an interesting question. The next one. Degrees, including a JD from 4 different law schools worldwide. I also have several years of experience in international arbitration and litigation, training and working in top firms in the US. I recently made the bar, having a difficult time landing a job. Okay, the first thing is that the practice area you're in, international law arbitration, is a very difficult practice area. There's just not a lot of openings there. So that's the first thing. You need to, whatever you're doing in that practice area, you need to network and meet people and do everything you can to get out there and to make yourself marketable. I don't know why you have 4 law degrees. I'm assuming they're LLMs or something, and that's great. But and it's very impressive. It starts to look a little bit more academic than law firm oriented. Once you get the previous person who was teaching law. And I have nothing against academics, by the way. I think it's very interesting, but it's not practicing law. It's a totally different discipline. And that's just something you really want to think about. And yeah, so I would be very careful about what you're doing. I would make sure in terms of your practice area, that you think about what you want to concentrate on. International arbitration is just an extremely competitive practice area. It's very difficult to get. And now I don't know where you're trying to get a position, if it's in the US, and if you got a job just as a 1-year stint or a couple-year stint, or if it's internationally. But wherever you're trying to get a position, you want to be someone that is in demand. And the way to do that typically is to apply internationally to lots of firms where they may have a need for you. So I've had a lot of luck placing people in the Middle East with your background and in areas where there's not a lot of people like you, where there could be demand. And that's how I would recommend doing it, where places where they can't find people. It's very difficult to get positions in markets like Washington, D.C. and New York, and Houston is another big market for international arbitration, in Miami, because there's so much competition and so many international people that want to work there. So it's a very difficult practice area. It's something that almost anyone that went to law school overseas wants to do. And for that reason, it's very hard to get into. You really need to network in a lot. You really need to network for it, unfortunately. And it is difficult, I agree. But those are my suggestions. And then finding every firm you possibly can with an international arbitration litigation practice, but mainly international arbitration. So find every single firm you possibly can and apply to them. And a lot of those will not be, will be off the map. So you have to find things that aren't the biggest ones you're thinking of. You have to apply to every single possible one you can. Anyone who's been laid off became popular again in the law firm job market. What are the advice would you do for them to become in demand? Yeah, of course you can. I've seen people become popular again in the law firm market, of course. And getting laid off shouldn't slow you down. It should maybe make it a little difficult for you, but it's a bump in the road. The main thing to do if you get laid off is to apply to as many possible places as you can, and in your market or in other markets, and you should be able to get a job again and get on your feet. That's just how it works. And then when you do get a job, and if you get multiple jobs, take the best one you get, and then make sure that you commit and do the best job you can when you get there, and develop marketable skills and throw yourself into the work. The big mistake that people make is when they're laid off or they're not getting a job, is they say, oh, they're not looking at the whole totality of the market. There's literally, in Los Angeles, there's thousands and thousands of firms. And the same thing in New York City, thousands and thousands of firms. The idea that someone needs to sit around and not work is ridiculous. You need to really and push yourself. And if you think you're doing yourself a favor holding out for a really high paying job, that's just not true, because the longer you don't have a job, the more that's going to be a black mark on your resume. And it's not saying it's a permanent black mark, but you definitely don't want to be unemployed too long. And people don't know you're unemployed unless it goes into 2 years. Typically, when people put something on their resume, I worked at this firm in 2001 to 2002. I worked at this firm in 2003 to 2008, something like that. So that's how your resume starts looking long term. So it's nothing to worry about if you're laid off. It's not going to hurt you in the long run. But I would say that you really do need to step up your job search. And if you're not, you need to look at other markets. Everybody here needs to. I don't understand why people don't do this. And then to look in demand, you need to go to markets where there's demand. You need to find firms where there's demand and go that. How do you recommend approaching salary negotiations as an entry level attorney? As an entry level attorney, if you typically do not want to try to negotiate. If you're getting an offer, you typically don't want to try to negotiate salary too much, because there's typically going to be a lot of applicants for the type of job you're getting. Or if you're confident enough in yourself and you know that you can get other jobs, then you can tell the firm, this is what other firms are going to pay me. This is what the market is. And if it's a smaller firm that offers you certain things, then you can do that. But the big thing is every job has trade-offs. So I know, for example, partners that get offers of $4 million a year to work in a law firm, and they take the one that pays 2.5, because the one that pays 2.5 gives them better training, offers them more long-term opportunity, and they believe that the amount of money that they're investing up front, giving up, is going to be more than offset based on the experience and contacts and so forth that they're getting in the brand of the firm. So if you're going into a firm as an entry-level attorney, you're better off getting experience than not having a job. You're absolutely better off not negotiating your salary if it's going to, result in you not getting an offer. So you just have to think about all these things. And so I would recommend you do what you can to work on that and do the best you possibly can. Now, if you're negotiating a salary and there's other people, you're in your second level, second year, or something like that, and you have other options, or you're in a practice area where there's not a lot of people like you can negotiate it. But I don't know that it's a good idea to negotiate as an entry-level attorney, because there's always going to be a lot of people trying to get your same offer. The best way for you to negotiate is to have negotiation leverage. And the only way you're going to have negotiation leverage is if you have multiple offers and things that sound the best. So that means don't undermarket yourself as widely as you possibly can. Okay, let's see here. Litigation, I agree that certain personalities are best. I'm excited by the conflict in litigation. I enjoy writing and reading about cases. Good, and you should be a litigator. The concepts in litigation, using them across the other side. Corporations boring and clerical to me, and I never am drawn to type of work. Corporate seems like the better career option. Frankly, litigation is difficult. There's less demand. It's hard to get good jobs. You need better qualifications to work at firms. Where the bar would be lower if you were corporate. I almost feel insane for wanting to go into litigation, but it's corporate. What is it thinking here? Can litigators enjoy long-term success? No. If you like litigation, then you should be doing it. So these are all characteristics of people that are natural litigators. I knew I would be a natural litigator, and I was, because when I was in college, people were asking me to write papers for them. People were asking me to help them with court or to fight things. And I liked it, and I took to it, and it was exciting to me, and I enjoyed it. So if you're a natural litigator, clients will see that too. And clients will want to work with people that give them excitement. And you do better at things when you're excited about it. So there's no doubt you should be a litigator. You're just getting hung up on all this ego stuff, which is wanting to work in a big city and all that sort of thing, which I don't think is litigators can be litigators all over. You want to be where you're going to be able to get the most bang for your buck and have the most fun as a litigator. So a lot of times, frankly, people that really want to be litigators, many times they'll work in a big law firm for a couple of years and they'll do things like they'll go into the U.S. Attorney's office because they love doing that, or they'll do other things. So if you want to be a litigator, you can do very well. It's just very difficult to work for large law firms. And the large law firms, by the way, and many people never go to court. Many people you can make partner in many large law firms without ever going to court. So those are just things to think about. Let's see here. This is a good question too. I'm looking to transition from corporate to litigation position, more IP-centric position. Most years want 1 or 2 years of relevant experience, and the entry-level jobs are taken up by summer associates who go back. How do I get an entry-level position? Because you don't have to have relevant experience to transition. Okay, yeah, the only way to typically transition there's a couple different ways to do that. You have to, first of all, anybody that wants to transition practice areas needs to ask themselves why they're trying to transition practice areas. Like, why? Is it because you're interested in the entertainment industry? Is it because you think that's a better fit for your personality? I don't know. And so a lot of people, for example, I always get calls from people that want to go to LA and work in entertainment, or it's been going on forever, obviously, since I started. It's been going on since I started, but that's really how the whole thing works. But you typically want someone that wants to do corporate or litigation, wants to do IP, you need to put yourself in a firm that does that type of work. So my only suggestion to you would be to keep applying for firms that do that. My other suggestion would be to track down firms that do the type of work that don't have openings. As I said at the beginning of this presentation, almost all the placements I make are at firms that don't have openings. So if you do research and you find firms that do IP and entertainment related work and apply to them, then you should have something, you should get some interest, and you can do that in multiple markets. The other thing I would say is, in terms of the experience you're getting, people, when they look at your resume, it needs to pass like a sniff test. And so a sniff test means, do I see this practice area, see this on this person's resume? When I look at the resume, many times I can tell that someone wants to do entertainment because I'll see all sorts of stuff about the entertainment society in law school, working in an entertainment company before law school, all that sort of thing. So when I see that stuff, that shows me that the person probably wants to do entertainment. So many times if I see the person doing corporate, I know that they're going to leave as soon as they get an entertainment position. And so you need to, somehow your resume needs to commit to it. It needs to pass off the sniff test. You might be good for that. And I don't know how to do that. That means just getting that type of experience in your current law firm, or going to a law firm where you feel you can get that kind of experience. So that's a good question. Let's see. And here's the question. How do we go about applying to firms that do not have openings? That's a great question. The only way you do that is you just research them. You go into directories, you go into lists, you do research on Google, directories, lists, Google, and all sorts of ways to find jobs. That's it. You constantly work at the places, you look for different sources, and then you just apply. So firms do not need to have an opening for you to apply. The best way to apply to firms is to basically make sure that they're doing the type of work that you do, and to search for them, and then just apply to them. Most of them will list their human resources on their website. If they don't, just apply to, a name partner or something like that, name partner, or someone in your practice. That's it. And that's really the thing. And you need to knock on a lot of doors. It's a lot of work to get an interview and to get a job. My big piece of advice is to really knock on a lot of doors. No question in particular. Just thank you for the awesome presentation. Thank you for thanking me. I appreciate it. Okay. So this question is, I started studying in my home country as well as in London. I used to be a finance attorney at a law firm, General Counsel Bank in my home country. I'm at a smaller law firm in LA doing transactional work. How do we market yourself to major law firms as an international attorney? How do we market yourself to recruiters like yourself to help you in your job search? Okay, the thing is, you need to understand, so anytime you're applying to a large law firm, like, there's pluses and minuses. And so the big plus typically is they look for reasons to discount you. If you worked in banking, that's good. I don't know if you do banking now, but I would look for banking firms in LA. Large and small. You can find those online by just searching Google or different lists and so forth. I think they're listed on BCG too. We have a list of rankings. So research. So that's one thing I would do. The other thing you can do is you can, I don't know what your practice area is, but you should, whatever practice area you have, if it's focused enough, and I don't know how focused it is, but you should research firms to do that. I don't know if it's banking, but research firms to do that. But the problem is large law firms are not necessarily going to be interested in you as an international attorney, especially in LA. LA is not a big corporate market. LA is considered a mid-cap corporate market. So what that means is it's not like the most sophisticated of the corporate markets out there. It's more of a smaller type corporate market and mid-size, I guess. And so it's going to be difficult for you to find jobs. If you were an attorney in Los Angeles and you'd worked at a major US law firm and gone in-house, it would be difficult for you to get a job at another big firm. If you were just an international attorney that had worked at a top law firm in London and had moved to LA, it would be difficult for you to get a job. If you don't have a JD in LA, it's very difficult to get a job. The big thing is that, and if you're an attorney with more than 5 or 6 years of corporate experience, it would be difficult to get a job at the law firm. So the point is that you have a lot of things that are against you. So the only typical way that I could think of to do it would be if you, I don't know what type of finance actually, I don't know why I said banking. You said you're a finance attorney. So finance is actually a pretty good practice area. So I would find firms to do international practice area, international finance. There's a lot of, by the way, firms in LA, branches of firms in other markets that have strong finance practices, especially in New York. There's also, so I would try applying to those and see what happens. I know a lot of finance by asset finance and other people that are very senior and are able to get positions and have gotten them even internationally from New York and so forth when they're very like 15, 20 years out. I don't know why I said banking originally because you work with a bank, but if you're doing finance, it is a good practice area. I would research all the US firms that do, all the firms in LA that do finance related work and market yourself to those. You certainly can send me your resume, but the big issue is going to be your seniority, but there's not a lot of finance attorneys in LA, which is nice. But it sounds like you have a pretty good job right now, which is great. And other thing to long-term, if you wanted to firm, the big way of doing that would be to try to work on getting into to try to bring in business. But yeah, I would go with the finance route. I think that if you have a lot of experience doing that, that could help. And you can always go to smaller firms. Like smaller firms, especially mid-sized firms, are always looking for some corporate help. And so you may be able to get a better job with a mid-sized firm and move from there. Are you seeing a subset of corporate works, M&A, securities, technology, transactions? So M&A is really the most in demand, but capital markets is very in demand right now. Technology transactions is always going to be less in demand. M&A is the most marketable long-term job, and then securities, I think, is a little bit less marketable, but securities work is fairly in demand right now. Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for being part of this webinar today. I appreciate it. And you can certainly contact me through at h.barnes@BCG Attorney Search. Again, that's h.barnes@BCG Attorney Search. And appreciate everyone being here today. Thank you.